KL, the alpha leader, rode through the thick forest on his black stallion, his eyes scanning the shadows. The battle had ended hours ago, leaving the woods silent except for the occasional rustle of leaves and distant calls of nocturnal creatures. His armor was dented, and streaks of blood stained his chest plate. But his pride was intact. He had survived, yet the unease in his chest refused to fade. Something felt wrong. He had led his pack into the valley with confidence, expecting to crush the rival clans and drive away the marauders who had terrorized their lands for months. Kale was known for his strength, for his tactical mind, for his unwavering courage, but above all, for his loyalty. And now, that loyalty had been twisted against him. As he moved deeper into the forest, a strange quiet settled. The birds had stopped singing, and the wind itself seemed to hesitate. Brushing his face with an unnatural stillness, Kale slowed his horse to a cautious walk, feeling a tension that had nothing to do with his wounds. Suddenly, a shadow darted between the trees. Kale instinctively raised his sword, but the movement was too swift, too deliberate. Before he could react, a spear pierced his side, the pain sharp and immediate. He cried out, falling from his horse, the world tilting around him, his vision blurred, the forest spinning like a dark storm. Kyle. He tried to call, but his voice failed. He struggled to rise, but the strength in his legs was gone. The forest around him seemed to mock him, twisting with shadows that danced just out of reach. And then he saw it, a figure, his closest lieutenant, stepping from the darkness. The man who had sworn loyalty to him now held a cruel smile, watching Kale writhe in pain. "You should have known better." "Alpha," the man said. "Power is not given, it is taken. And tonight, I take it from you." Kale's mind raced. Betrayal burned hotter than the pain in his body. This man had fought by his side for years, had laughed at his victories, mourned his losses, had sworn to protect the pack as much as Kale himself. And now, he had been left to die in the cursed forest. Weakness clawed at Kale's chest. He tried to move, to strike, but his strength failed. Darkness began to close in around the edges of his vision. The shadows of the forest pressed closer, and whispers slithered through the trees, voices calling his name, taunting him with fear and regret. He thought of his pack, his people relying on him, trusting him to survive. He could not let death take him so easily, not yet. But how could he rise when his body refused to obey? When betrayal had shattered the certainty of his path, a strange warmth broke through the haze of pain. It was small, unexpected, and entirely foreign. Kale felt a tiny hand brush against his face. Confused, he blinked, trying to focus, and saw her, a little girl with hair like sunlight and eyes that shone like the forest itself. "You can't die, not yet," she whispered. Her voice was soft, yet filled with a power that made the shadows retreat ever so slightly. He only stared, unsure if he had truly seen a child, or if the forest had conjured her from his mind in his dying moments. She climbed over his fallen body with surprising agility, her small hands moving as if guided by an unseen force. Kale's pride struggled against the helplessness, but the warmth of her touch was undeniable. She pressed a bundle to his chest, murmuring again, "Hold on, I'm here. I'll not let them take you." The forest around them shifted, strange lights flickering between the trees. Kale realized the girl was more than she seemed. Perhaps the whispers of the forest had sent her, perhaps she was a child of prophecy, or a spirit, or simply a force of courage that the forest itself had conjured. He did not have time to think. He had to survive. With her help, Kale felt the first flickers of strength return. The forest seemed to bend to her presence, shadows retreating as she guided him toward a narrow path, hidden among the roots and rocks. The air smelled of moss and rain, ancient and pure, and Kale found himself following, trusting this child in a way he had trusted no one for years. They moved slowly, every step a battle. Kale's wounds burned with every heartbeat, but the girl never faltered. Her determination gave him hope, and hope ignited a fire in him that no shadow could extinguish. As they reached a small clearing, Kale collapsed against the earth, gasping for breath. The girl knelt beside him, her hands pressing lightly against his chest where the spear had pierced. A soft glow emanated from her touch, gentle but steady, easing some of the pain. "Who are you?" Kale finally rasped, his voice breaking from exhaustion. I am Leora," the girl said. Her eyes met his, unwavering. "The forest told me to find you. You cannot die. Not yet. The world still needs you, Alpha." Kale felt a strange mix of awe and disbelief. How could someone so small, so young, carry such power? Yet there was no doubt in her eyes, no hesitation in her movements. She was a force he could not ignore, a presence that demanded his trust even when he had none to give. Minutes passed, then hours. The forest seemed to breathe with them, shadows lingering at the edges, whispering threats and warnings, but never crossing the light. Leora carried, Kale's mind drifted in and out of consciousness. The warmth of the girl beside him, the only tether keeping him from slipping into the darkness. Finally, as night deepened and the forest grew still, Kale opened his eyes fully. Leora was watching him, her expression calm, resolute, and somehow wise beyond her years. He tried to rise, but his body refused. "You must rest," she said firmly. "The forest will protect you, and I will not leave your side." Kale nodded, helpless, but aware of a strange new bond forming. This child had saved him from death, had brought him back from the brink when all hope seemed lost. And in that moment, he understood something he had never allowed himself to feel fully before: trust. Fragile and luminous, could exist even in the darkest of places. But even as he closed his eyes, relief fleetingly warming his heart, the shadows at the edge of the clearing stirred. Whispers grew louder, voices calling from the depths of the forest. Kale felt the threat of unseen eyes watching, waiting. Leora's hand tightened slightly on his arm, her small face set with determination. "They will come," she said softly, "and you must be ready. Even now." The darkness does not sleep. Kale's heart clenched. He had survived betrayal, survived death itself, but the forest's curse had not ended. The battle for life, for leadership, and for something more, something deeper than pride or power, was only beginning. And in the quiet, beneath the ancient trees and the moonlit sky, Kale realized that he was no longer alone. A small, unassuming girl had climbed into his life, defying the darkness and forcing him to fight in ways he had never imagined. The wind shifted, carrying with it the first scent of danger. Kale's eyes opened, sharp and alert despite his weakness. Leora looked to him, silent but unafraid. And he knew with a certainty that frightened him and inspired him at once. The forest had chosen her to save him. But in doing so, it had bound their fates together. The night deepened, the shadows lengthened. And Kale understood that survival would not come from strength alone but from trust, courage, and the unexpected bond that had formed between him and the child who had climbed to save him. And somewhere in the darkness beyond the clearing, a presence stirred, watching, waiting, a silent promise of trials yet to come. Kale closed his eyes again, letting exhaustion overtake him, but the memory of her touch stayed. Leora, small and defiant, had saved him, and in doing so, had begun a story that neither of them could yet understand. The forest whispered. The night watched. And the Alpha leader, once left for dead, began to awaken to a world he had never known. A world where hope could emerge from the smallest of hands, and courage could come from the unlikeliest of places. Cliffhanger. As Kale drifted into a restless sleep, a rustling sound came from the shadows, and a low, menacing growl echoed through the trees. Leora stiffened, her eyes wide. "They've come for you," she whispered. Kale's heart clenched, and the night promised that his fight was far from over. Kale awoke to the soft rustle of leaves and the smell of damp earth. His body ached, every muscle stiff and every wound throbbing. yet the warmth of a small hand on his chest kept him tethered to life. Leora sat nearby, humming softly, her golden hair catching the slant of morning light filtering through the thick forest canopy. "Easy," she whispered when she saw him stir. "Don't move too fast. You are hurt badly, Alpha." Kale tried to sit upright but felt dizzy, the forest tilting around him. Leora's small hands steadied him, surprising him with her strength and focus. Despite his pride and years of commanding others, he had to rely on her. The thought made his chest tighten, but he said nothing. Words felt heavy, unnecessary when survival was still uncertain. Leora studied him carefully, her green eyes reflecting intelligence and courage far beyond her age. "The forest chose me to save you," she said quietly. "It told me you must live. You are important. Not just to your pack, but to everything that walks under the trees and breathes under the sky." Kale's mind reeled. He had fought battles for his people, for his land, for the survival of his pack, but he had never imagined his fate could be intertwined with a child of the forest. Yet, there was no doubt in her presence, no uncertainty. She was a force of nature, a spark of something old, something magical. He nodded slowly, letting her words sink in. "Then, we survive," he said finally, his voice hoarse. "Together." Leora's lips curved into a small, determined smile. "Good. You will need strength. The forest has not given up on you. But the darkness will not rest either." With careful hands, she helped Kale to a shallow stream nearby. The water was icy and fresh, cleansing the blood from his wounds, though each movement sent sharp pain through his side. Kale gritted his teeth, unwilling to show weakness. Leora, however, did not flinch. She pressed herbs and leaves into his cuts, murmuring as if she knew exactly what they needed. The forest seemed to respond to her touch. The shadows at the edges of the clearing hesitated, almost respectful. "You heal faster than I expected," Kale said, a note of surprise in his voice. "I have learned from the forest," Leora replied. "It teaches patience, courage, and knowing what cannot be seen." Kale's brow furrowed. "What cannot be seen?" he asked. She looked at him with solemn eyes. "The enemy that left you for dead. It is not just human. There is a curse in the forest. It whispers in the shadows, twisting hearts and minds. Your betrayer. He serves something older, darker than even the fiercest clans you have fought." Kale's stomach clenched. He had faced many foes in his life, but the idea of a darkness manipulating people, spreading deceit and death, sent a chill deeper than any winter wind. Yet, he did not falter. He had survived battles worse than this. He would survive this too. For the next days, Leora guided him deeper into her sanctuary, a hidden place under ancient trees where sunlight barely touched the moss-covered ground. Birds with iridescent feathers flitted above, and streams sang as if offering a song of protection. Kale marveled at the place, realizing that while he had been a leader among men, he had never truly understood the power of the world around him. "You have strength," Leora said one morning as Kale practiced slow movements to rebuild his muscles. "But strength alone is not enough. You need your mind, your heart, your trust." Kale frowned. He had trusted many before, and betrayal had left scars deeper than any wound on his body. Yet, looking at Leora, he felt a seed of hope he could not name. She had risked everything to save him. A small child against the dark forest and his mortal injuries. How could he not believe her courage? "You speak as if I am weak," he said quietly, frustration softening into reflection. "I have led armies, faced death, yet here I am, relying on a child to keep me alive." Leora's eyes shone with quiet fire. "No, Alpha. You are not weak. You are learning. Even the strongest need help sometimes. Even leaders need guidance. That is how you survive what is coming." Kale was silent, thinking of his betrayer and the darkness that lingered beyond the trees. Rage burned within him, sharp and bitter. But Leora's calm voice reminded him that anger alone could not win battles. Strategy, patience, and trust. These were weapons often overlooked by warriors blinded by pride. Days turned into nights, and Kale's body slowly healed under Leora's care. Yet, healing was more than physical. The weight of betrayal lingered, gnawing at his mind. Every time he closed his eyes, he saw his lieutenant's cruel smile, heard the taunting words, and felt the spear tear into his side. The forest offered no comfort against such memories. One evening, as twilight painted the sky in shades of violet and gold, Leora brought Kale to a small hill overlooking the forest. From this vantage point, the trees stretched endlessly, and in the distance, dark clouds gathered unnaturally low. "The curse is awakening," Leora said, her voice barely above a whisper. "It remembers you, Alpha. It knows you are alive, and it will try to break you again." Kale clenched his fists, staring into the horizon. The thought of facing the darkness again filled him with both fear and determination. He had survived once. He would survive again. But this time, he was not alone. Leora's presence beside him was more than protection. It was guidance, courage, and a strange, unspoken bond that pulled at something deep within him. "What is your name?" he asked quietly. "I already told you," she replied, a faint smile on her lips. "Leora. But the forest calls me other things too. Guardian. Helper. Friend." Kale considered this. He had been called many titles: Alpha, Leader, Warrior, but none felt as heavy as the responsibility now pressing on him. Yet, for the first time, he felt something lighter as well. A connection not built on fear or authority, but on trust, courage, and mutual need. Suddenly, a movement caught Kale's eye. Shadows shifted unnaturally at the edge of the clearing. He tensed, hand instinctively reaching for his sword, though his strength was not yet fully restored. Leora's small hand rested on his arm. "They are close," she said. Her voice was steady, calm, and unwavering. "The curse sends servants to test you, to see if you are worthy. You must not fail." Kale's heart pounded. He had survived betrayal, survived death itself. Yet the forest's darkness was patient, relentless. He realized the fight was not just for life, but for the soul of his leadership, for the safety of his people, and perhaps for the world itself. "Then we face them," he said quietly, his voice firm, though fatigue clung to every word. "Together." Leora nodded, her green eyes shining. She had taught him courage in ways he had never imagined, had shown him that even the smallest hand could change the course of fate. As night fell, the forest grew alive with whispers, shadows stretching and twisting like living things. Kale's senses sharpened, every nerve alert. Yet he felt the presence of Leora beside him, a beacon of hope in the encroaching darkness. And then, from the depths of the forest, a howl split the night. It was low, menacing, filled with a malice that made Kale's blood run cold. Shadows moved faster, closer, and the trees seemed to close in around them. Leora placed herself between Kale and the approaching danger, small but defiant. "You have strength," she said softly. "But you must also have courage. Remember, Alpha. Courage is not the absence of fear. It is standing despite it." Kale drew in a deep breath, every wound screaming, every muscle protesting. He looked at Leora, the child who had risked everything for him, and felt a surge of determination unlike anything before. He would not fail, not for himself, not for his pack, not for her. The shadows gathered, thick and threatening, yet Kale's eyes burned with resolve. The night was dark. The curse was patient. And danger was coming, but he was alive. He was not alone. And the forest, along with the small girl who had climbed to save him, would bear witness to the strength of an Alpha who refused to be broken. Cliffhanger. A massive shadow, darker than the night itself, moved at the edge of the clearing. Its eyes glowed like embers, watching, waiting. Leora stepped forward, gripping Kale's arm. "It's here," she whispered. The one who betrayed you, and far worse. Kale's heart clenched as he realized that the true test of his survival and his soul was only just beginning. Kale tightened his grip on his sword, though his muscles still ached from the injuries he had barely survived. The shadow at the edge of the clearing moved with unnatural grace. Its glowing eyes locked on them like a predator sizing up its prey. Leora stepped closer to him, her small frame unafraid, her green eyes fierce with determination. "They've come to test you," she whispered. "Not just your strength, but your heart." Kale's jaw tightened. The forest had protected him, healed him, and guided him through recovery. Now, it was forcing him to face the darkness directly. He felt the familiar tension of battle rise within him, the rush of danger, the edge of fear sharpening his senses. Yet, this was unlike any battle he had fought before. This was a trial of the soul, of trust, and of survival beyond the limits of mere skill. The shadows began to advance. They moved silently, like living smoke, surrounding the clearing. Kale took a deep breath, feeling the weight of his past failures and betrayals pressing against his chest. He thought of the lieutenant who had left him to die, of the armies he had commanded, of the lives that depended on his survival. Rage and fear mingled inside him, threatening to overwhelm. Leora's hand touched his arm again. "You do not face this alone," she said. "You have me. You have the forest. You have yourself. Trust that." Kale nodded, drawing strength from her words. He had spent years learning to rely only on himself. But now he realized that trust in others, in the world, in something greater, was a weapon he had long ignored. The shadows closed in, and Kale raised his sword. The first figure emerged from the darkness, humanoid but twisted, as if the forest itself had contorted it. Its eyes glowed red, and its voice hissed like smoke. "You were not meant to survive," it whispered, voice carrying the weight of ancient malice. "You were broken, and yet you walk. How weak you must feel." Kale's chest tightened, but he did not falter. "I walk because I choose to," he said, his voice steady. "Not because I am unafraid, but because I must protect what matters." The shadow lunged. Kale swung his sword, meeting it with a clash that rang through the forest. The force of the impact shook him, but he held his ground, each movement deliberate, guided by both instinct and the careful teachings of Leora. Beside him, the girl moved with surprising agility, placing herbs in a circle on the ground and whispering words Kale could not understand. The shadows recoiled slightly at the circle, hissing and retreating. It was clear, Leora's power, small and unassuming though it seemed, was formidable. Kale realized then that their strength was not in his sword alone, nor in her magic alone, but in their combined presence. His leadership and her courage, his experience and her intuition, created a force the shadows had not anticipated. As the battle continued, Kale was forced to confront more than the physical threat. The shadows twisted into forms he recognized, faces of those he had lost, of people who had betrayed him, of memories that had haunted him. Each strike of the sword was mirrored by a strike of memory, a reminder of failure and pain. But Leora's hand on his arm, her presence beside him, kept him anchored. "Do not fight them with anger," she called. "Fight them with truth. Fight with courage, not fear." Kale's mind cleared. Rage had served him in many battles, but now he saw the shadows for what they were. Tests. Illusions meant to weaken his heart. He focused, moving with precision, striking with purpose, yet letting his mind remain calm. One shadow, larger than the rest, lunged at him from the tree line. Kale parried, feeling the force vibrate through his arms, and then drove forward with the sword. The shadow screamed, dissolving into mist as it vanished. He stumbled but did not fall. Leora's voice rang out, guiding him. "You see, Alpha? Strength is not only in your arm. It is in your heart, in your trust, in knowing when to fight and when to endure." Kale's chest heaved, but he nodded. He was learning, growing, and changing. The forest and Leora were not simply saving him, they were transforming him into a leader capable of more than brute strength. A leader who could endure not only battle, but betrayal, fear, and darkness. The shadows regrouped, now forming a figure that was larger, darker, more menacing than anything Cale had faced. Its eyes glowed like embers, and its voice carried the weight of ancient power. "You cannot defeat me," it hissed. "I am the betrayal, the fear, the curse. You belong to me." Cale's heart pounded. This was no ordinary foe. This was the embodiment of everything that had tried to break him. The culmination of fear, betrayal, and darkness. Yet he did not falter. He thought of his pack, of the lives depending on him, of the child who had climbed to save him. He lifted his sword. And in that moment, something within him shifted. It was not rage, not fear, not even hope, it was resolve. Pure, unshakable resolve. "I belong to no one," he said, voice ringing through the forest. "I stand because I choose to. I protect because I must. And I fight because I will not be broken." The shadow lunged, but Cale was ready. He moved with precision, striking not just with his sword, but with strategy, endurance, and heart. Leora circled him, her small hands weaving protective patterns. Muttering incantations the forest seemed to respond to. The combined force of alpha and child, of strength and courage, began to overwhelm the shadow. The shadow screamed, twisting and distorting, but Cale's resolve did not waver. He struck with clarity and purpose, and finally, the monstrous form dissolved into mist, leaving the clearing silent but charged with lingering energy. Cale fell to his knees, exhausted, every wound aching, every muscle trembling. Leora rushed to his side, pressing her hand against his chest to calm him. "You did it," she whispered. "You survived, because you fought, not with fear, but with courage." Cale looked at her, awe and gratitude mixing with the lingering edge of battle adrenaline. "I could not have done it without you," he admitted, his voice quiet but sincere. "You saved me and guided me. You were more than help. You were hope." Leora smiled, a small but radiant light in the shadowed clearing. "And you are stronger than I imagined. Stronger not only in your body, but in your heart. That is why the forest chose you. That is why I was sent." Cale absorbed her words, feeling a deep shift within himself. He had survived death, betrayal, and darkness. He had learned trust, patience, and humility. And he had learned that true strength came not from isolation or pride, but from connection, courage, and the willingness to fight not only for oneself, but for others. Yet, even in the quiet that followed, a tension lingered. The forest was calm, but the air carried an unspoken warning. Cale knew this victory was only a beginning. The shadows he had faced were not the end, they were tests, preludes to challenges far greater, forces darker and more cunning than he could yet imagine. He looked at Leora, her small frame steady, her eyes unwavering. "What comes next?" he asked, voice low. Leora's gaze swept the horizon, past the trees, into the unknown reaches of the forest. "The curse is older than any of us," she said, "and it is patient. It waits for the right moment, the right weakness. You have survived this test, Alpha, but more are coming. You must be ready, or it will claim more than your life." Cale clenched his fists, feeling the echo of the battle in every limb. "Then I will prepare," he said. "I will fight, endure, and lead. Whatever comes, I will not fall." Leora nodded, a silent promise passing between them. They were bound not only by circumstance, but by choice. Cale's survival had depended on her courage. But now their fates were intertwined. He was no longer the lone alpha, hardened and isolated. He was a leader reborn, guided by wisdom, bravery, and the unwavering light of a child who had risked everything to save him. As the forest deepened into night, shadows stirred at the edges once more, Kale's senses sharpened. He knew the darkness was still out there, waiting, watching, patient, and relentless. But he also knew he was not alone. He had Leora, the forest, and his own renewed strength. Together, they would face whatever trials lay ahead. And somewhere deep in the woods, a faint glow shimmered, a reminder that the curse had not ended, that the tests were only beginning, and that the true battle for Kale's soul, and perhaps the fate of all who depended on him, had yet to come. Cliffhanger. A chilling voice echoed through the trees, familiar and terrifying. Alpha, you survived, but your journey has just begun. The darkness remembers, and it hungers. Leora's hand gripped Kale's arm tightly. It is coming. Stronger than before. Kale's eyes narrowed, heart steady, as he realized that the ultimate test of courage, loyalty, and leadership awaited. The forest was quiet now, but the tension in the air was thicker than ever. Kale stood at the edge of the clearing, sword in hand, muscles still sore from the previous battles, his breath coming in steady, controlled bursts. Leora was beside him, small but resolute, her green eyes scanning the shadows with an intensity that belied her youth. The darkness is near, she whispered. It has gathered its strength, and it knows you are ready. Kale tightened his grip on the sword. He had faced betrayal, near death, and the shifting shadows of the forest. He had survived trials meant to break him, guided by the courage and wisdom of Leora. But now, the ultimate challenge awaited. The shadows at the edges of the trees grew thicker, coalescing into a form that made the hair on the back of his neck rise. A figure stepped forward, massive and imposing, cloaked in a darkness that seemed to absorb the light. Its eyes burned with red fire, and its voice rolled like thunder through the clearing. Alpha Kale, it intoned. You have survived, you have endured, but your soul, your heart, they are mine to claim. Kale's chest tightened, but he stood firm. The forest seemed to bend around him, responding to his presence and Leora's protective energy. He felt the culmination of all he had learned, the courage to face fear, the wisdom to fight, not with anger alone, the humility to trust another. I am not yours, Kale said steadily. I am the alpha of my people. I am a leader who protects, who endures, who stands even when the world seeks to break me. You will not claim me. The shadow moved, faster than thought, striking at him with force that made the earth tremble. Kale parried, rolling to the side, feeling the sting of its blows but refusing to falter. Beside him, Leora moved with graceful precision, tracing protective symbols in the air that caused the shadows to recoil. Her whispers carried power, a language older than the forest itself, and Kale realized he was not merely fighting with his sword, but with every lesson the forest and the little girl had taught him. You have courage, the shadow said, its voice a hiss of fury and admiration. But courage alone cannot save you. Kale's eyes narrowed. No, but courage, trust, and choice together can. And I choose to stand. I choose to protect. I choose to endure. The shadow lunged again, and this time, Kale met it head-on. Every strike was precise. Every movement guided by strategy and heart. The forest seemed to pulse with their struggle, the wind carrying the clash of blade and darkness through the ancient trees. As the battle raged, Kale was forced to confront not only the shadow but the fear and anger that had lingered inside him for years. He had been betrayed, left for dead, and haunted by visions of failure. But Leora's steady presence reminded him that strength was not the absence of fear, it was acting despite it. You are stronger than I imagined, the shadow said, its voice tinged with frustration. But even strength has limits. Even courage can falter. Kale gritted his teeth. Limits are meant to be tested. Courage is meant to be chosen. And I will not falter, not now, not ever. The forest itself seemed to respond to his words. Roots twisted, vines shifted, and the shadows found themselves trapped, struggling against the protective energy Leora had woven around the clearing. Kale moved with renewed determination, his strikes landing with precision, forcing the darkness backward. But the shadow was cunning. It split into multiple forms, attacking from every direction, testing Kale's endurance and focus. For a moment, he felt exhaustion creep in, threatening to overwhelm him. Leora stepped forward, placing her small hands on his chest. "You are not alone," she said. "You do not face this by yourself. Trust in me. Trust in the forest. Trust in yourself." Kale drew a deep breath, centering himself. The connection between them, forged in survival and courage, gave him the strength to push back. He moved as one with the forest, as one with Leora, striking with both precision and purpose. The shadows faltered, their forms twisting and dissolving in the light of their combined will. Kyle saw the true form of the darkness, a massive, twisted figure. Once human, now corrupted by betrayal and curse. Its eyes, however, were familiar. The face behind the darkness was the lieutenant who had left him for dead, now transformed into a vessel of the forest's lingering malice. Kale's heart clenched. "You were my brother in arms," he said quietly. "You were supposed to protect, not destroy." The shadow hissed, the human voice breaking through its monstrous form. "I chose power, and you were weak. I will finish what I began." Kale's eyes blazed. "No. Weakness is not survival. Weakness is abandoning those who trust you. You chose darkness. I choose life, courage, and protection." With a final surge of strength, Kale lunged forward, sword flashing in the dim light. Leora chanted beside him, her power weaving a net of light and protection. Together, their combined force struck the shadow, piercing its heart and shattering the darkness. The lieutenant's scream echoed through the trees before dissolving into silence. Kale fell to his knees, exhausted, every wound burning, every muscle trembling. Leora rushed to his side, placing a gentle hand on his chest. "You did it," she whispered. "You survived. Because you fought not just with strength, but with heart." Kale looked at her, awe and gratitude mixing with relief. "I could not have done it without you," he said, his voice quiet but sincere. "You saved me, guided me, taught me courage in ways I could never have imagined." Leora smiled softly, brushing a stray lock of hair from his face. "And you were willing to learn, to endure, to trust. That is why you survived. That is why the forest chose you." The clearing grew calm, the shadows vanishing completely. The wind carried a gentle, approving whisper through the ancient trees, as if the forest itself acknowledged Kale's victory. He felt a deep shift within him, not just in strength, but in understanding, humility, and purpose. He was no longer the alpha, who relied only on his sword and instincts. He was a leader reborn, tempered by trust, guided by courage, and connected to something greater than himself. For the first time since the betrayal, Kale allowed himself to relax, leaning back against the soft moss and closing his eyes. He felt Leora's presence beside him, steady and unwavering, and a sense of peace settled over him. The night, once filled with shadows and whispers of death, now seemed alive, with gentle light. Leora sat close, her small hand resting lightly on his arm. "You have faced the curse," she said softly. "You have faced betrayal, death, and darkness, and you have survived. But remember, the world is full of trials. This is only the beginning of what you can achieve." Kale nodded, absorbing her words. He had survived impossible odds, learned to trust, and discovered that true strength came from heart, mind, and courage. Not just physical might. And most importantly, he had discovered that even the smallest hands could carry the greatest power. The dawn broke over the forest, casting golden light through the trees. Kale rose slowly, feeling renewed, not only in body but in spirit. He turned to Leora, a quiet smile on his lips. "We have much to do," he said. "The pack, the kingdom, they will need me, and I will need you by my side." Leora nodded, a glimmer of pride and determination in her eyes. Always, she said. Kale sheathed his sword, feeling the weight of leadership settle comfortably on his shoulders, not as a burden, but as a responsibility he was now ready to bear. He had been left for dead, betrayed, and tested by darkness. But he had emerged stronger, wiser, and more connected to the world around him than ever before. Together, Kale and Leora stepped forward, leaving the clearing behind. The forest seemed to breathe with them, protective and alive. As if acknowledging that a new chapter had begun, the shadows may have lingered in the distance. But for now, light and courage had prevailed. And in the quiet, Kale realized that his survival was not only a personal victory, it was a promise. A promise to his pack, to the forest, and to the small girl who had climbed into his life and saved him. Their destinies were intertwined now, bound by courage, trust, and the unshakable bond of shared survival. As they moved deeper into the forest, the first birds sang, the wind whispered through the trees, and the world seemed to awaken to the presence of an alpha reborn. Kale's heart was steady, his mind clear, and his spirit unbroken. Whatever trials lay ahead, he knew this. He would face them. Not alone, and not with fear, but with courage, trust, and the unwavering strength of a leader tempered by love, guidance, and hope. The forest watched, ancient and wise, and the legend of the Alpha who had been left for dead, but saved by the courage of a small girl, began to spread through whispered leaves and the songs of the wind. A story of redemption, bravery, and the enduring power of trust. Cliffhanger. Closing. As Kale and Leora walked toward the horizon, a distant rumble shook the forest. The wind carried a voice, faint but clear. The trials are far from over. Alpha Kale. Darkness waits. Kale looked at Leora, who gripped his arm, and together they faced the rising sun, ready for whatever destiny awaited.